We get the horrible noise.
Yeah.
Perfect. Hey guys, hope you are well. So we're joined by Robbie Cassidy, who will run us through all the amazing things on how we can start to overcome and manage and better understand our injuries moving forward, and ultimately feeling like $1,000,000 inside and outside of our training. Um, Robbie, amazing to have you on, dude. If we could just start off with a bit of a quick introduction for people that might not be aware of who you are, who Robbie Cassidy is, and we can kind of take it from there.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks a million for having me. Plum, that's your again for inviting me on. So I guess to give a brief overview who I am, my name is Robbie Cassidy. I go on Instagram as Mobility Tutor, and I am a athletic therapist and a physiotherapist. And basically, I deal with people with mobility issues and long-term injuries. So that's kind of my focus at the moment. Most, like the majority of my clientele, would have such like back pain, knee pain, hip pain, shoulder pain, or they could be coming off the back of surgeries and they're just struggling to get over it. So it's usually recurring. It's things that are going on for longer than 3 months. It could be 3 months to 10 years, 15 years. And that's the majority of the people that I work with. In terms of where I am at the moment, I'm living away. I'm from Ireland originally, from the west coast of Ireland. And I'm living abroad at the moment. So I'm living in Indonesia, in Bali in Indonesia. And I guess that's kind of the main run through of who I am at the moment. But yeah, thanks a million for having me on. Whatever way you want to go.
Yeah, me too. I think it'll be an incredibly valuable conversation. So just on the kind of people you help side of things in a little bit, are there kind of similarities, or or are they kind of people that are like athletes, or is it just more kind of day-to-day and normal everyday people?
Yeah. So good question, actually. I help people from literally every level, from recreational. The majority of them are active people getting back to training, and that's what I do. So it's recreational up to people that are playing professional Premier League or Championship or anything like that as well. So I work at all levels, and I don't have a preference of who they are or what they are, as long as they have a goal of what they want to do and what they want to get back to. And usually it's some type of a sport or some type of activity, whether it be football, whether it be running, triathlons, rugby, whatever it is. Having that goal in mind goes a long way, because the majority of the people have injuries that are going on, as I said, for a long time. And with that, there's a lot more involved in it than just the actual injury itself. So it's not that they have a torn muscle or a sprained ligament. What it is a lot of the time is that the nervous system has changed, and now it's more prone to giving them a lot of pain, giving them a lot of tightness, as it's like an overprotective response. So a lot of the stuff that I do is trying to take down that response. So if you pull a hamstring, great, I can help you out, and I have no problem. I can be able to give you a plan and do all that. But the majority of my clientele are people that are struggling with things like for a long time, and there's just a different avenue towards that than what way you would look at rehabbing it.
That's that's super interesting. So, one thing I kind of picked up was the nervous system bit changing. How does that change? Does it change the same way for everyone that kind of pick up an injury?
Yeah. So if you think about it, you could break it down into like a really simple way. If you look at it, if you look at yourself after you get a burn, you have a red mark on your arm. And basically, if you touch that red mark, it's very sensitive and it gets very sore. Okay. Now, if you touch around that area, there's no pain. Okay. It's only on the burnt area. Now, the reason being is that the body has adapted, and it's giving you more pain over that particular area so it can protect it. So the same thing happens like around the body. So an easy example would be somebody who has maybe torn their ACL. You'll notice that they get a lot of knee pain when they get back into training. They can get a lot of knee pain if they get very stressed out. They can get knee pain if they're fatigued, if they're tired, or if there's a change in their training. So let's say they move from back squats to like a split squat, something like that, where the change goes from a bilateral to unilateral. And the reason being is that the nervous system itself is just highly tuned. It's very protective. So it'll just start kicking up and flaring up and giving you pain at a very early stage. And it's just because like it's more, it remembers every injury that you have. And I guess to make sure that you don't injure yourself again in that area, it just warns you about that a lot earlier than it does for other things. So we can go down that path about like what pain is and what causes it if we want to, because it's very detailed, and for people it might be like, what does he mean by it becomes sensitive? So I have no problem going down that path if you'd like to a small bit more, but you definitely be getting into the weeds.
Yeah, yeah, super interesting. I've never kind of looked at it, kind of thought of it that way around as well. So, um, yeah, so I suppose when you mentioned kind of going over and changing from changing or like changing the exercises or going from a squat to a split squat, for example, is that kind of just a body just kind of flaring up because it's a new movement pattern, or does it depend?
Yeah, so you can get that. Basically, it's a new movement pattern, so muscles have to coordinate slightly different. Okay, so it'll flare up a small bit earlier because of that reason. It's that it's just trying to figure out what's the best way to organize the muscles themselves. Now, the other side of things is that it's putting a lot of weight. Let's say for people who maybe not know the split squat, the lunge, it's basically the same movement. If you when you go into lunge from a back squat, you're obviously loading that leg, loading that knee a lot more by itself, and it's relied upon that it comes up or that you get up out of that position. Okay, the back squat, if you fatigue on one side, you can shift your weight over to the other side to help you get up out of it. And the reason that the fact that there's going to be a lot more weight going through that, a lot more resistance going through that joint, the sensitivity is just taking care of it. It's just making sure that, okay, right, you probably did a small bit too much today, because it usually flares up after. Like it can flare up in the time, but usually flares up after. And it's basically saying that you did a small bit too much today. It's a bit more fatigue than it usually is. And then with that, then it's like, okay, let's just be careful that you don't do too much on it tomorrow again. So it'll just turn up that pain. Now, with people who have injuries going on a long time, that pain can stay up then for 3, 4, 5 days, as opposed to, you know, yourself, if you're training, I know myself even from this week, and you do RDLs for the first time, and your hamstrings are just lit up for a week after it then, because they're just not used to that position, a lot of eccentric load on them. And just in general, then they're just stay that bit tighter because you haven't tested them. And it's the same thing. It's just a new exercise, new movement. Needs to make sure that you don't overload it and don't injure it. And to do that, then it just gives you pain and it gives you tightness. And that's the easiest way to describe it.
Wow, fascinating. So, I know that that one can kind of vary a little bit. I don't know if you have an answer to it, but with the kind of different stuff, so you've got compound stuff like the squats and the RDLs, and you've got the split squats and the kind of unilateral movements. Do you find there to be particular like ones that kind of pick like ones that injuries come up more from, like initially, or or
Yeah.
does it not matter too much?
Yeah, that's a good one, or a good question, because there is exercises that people are going to get not exactly injured on, but their old injuries will flare up more on. And a lot of the time it's lunges in general. Like a lot of the time people who have lower limb injuries will flare up on lunges. The number one that you see though so often is an RDL and back pain. That's a very, very common one of what you get, or a deadlift and back pain. Now there's a lot attached to that, and like you could go into all the detail in the world, but with it, a lot of the time people are overprotective of their back in general. So even if they're doing an RDL and they come slightly out of position and then they feel the back muscles working a bit more than they should, their belief that they shouldn't do that can actually cause that to kick up a small bit more. So if they've had back pain in the past, they come slightly out of position. When they're doing the RDL, they say, oh, like shouldn't be there, shouldn't be in that position. And then they go up and down. A lot of the time they'll finish out the set. They might finish out the gym session, but then 6 hours later, 12 hours later, the next day, 2 days, things start to really kick up in the back. And it's because they had the idea that they shouldn't have been out of position at all. They need to really protect that area. They need to protect their back. And this then what you'll see is you get kind of a cascade of events that they start to take rest days when really they should actually just get back in and start doing exercises and doing bits and pieces. And then it kicks up for something that could be a 2-day issue, becomes a 2-week issue. So like RDLs and deadlifts are some of the most common ones, and it's because of people have beliefs around their back as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think being in the gym for so much of my time, I can definitely relate to kind of hearing that all the time as well. Like, that deadlift's a bag for your lower back, kind of thing. I always hear that one. So with that, then, like, with the deadlifts, like, how can we kind of begin to differentiate between the pain, or how can we know if we are kind of out of position too much, or how can we know kind of if our kind of we're putting too much of our pressure on our lower back or too much strain on it rather than doing it.
Yeah. So yeah, the best way to look at that is, first off, the deadlift is one of the best exercises you can do for your lower back. And people seem to think that they need to protect the lower back, and the lower back seems to be like a thing that needs to be minded and all that. But that's complete. That's for lack of a better word, is that's crap, because your lower back is extremely strong. Your spine itself is one of the strongest joints in your body, if not the strongest joint in your body. And basically, your set of joints, I should say, if you are overprotective and you're not working your back, you're going to be more likely to injure it. It's the same as if you jump on the bench press and you haven't done any benching, and then you put on whatever 60, 70, 80 kg, and you start doing that out of nowhere. You're likely to injure your shoulder or tear a pec because you've overloaded it when you haven't built up a tolerance to it. Okay. So it's the same thing when you look at the back, and when you look at the lower back, is that you're going to get DOMS, you're going to get muscle soreness if you haven't lifted in a while and you start lifting. Now, if you are used to lifting and you're just upping your volume, then you need to look at fatigue. Okay. So I look at these things before I look at exercise execution, because these things are going to be more likely to injure you than exercise execution. If you're fit, healthy, and completely rested and ready to get in the gym, you're very unlikely to injure yourself with any exercise. Okay. Unless you do something stupid like put way more than the weight that you've ever lifted on a bar and then try to do a squat, or do way more and then try to do a deadlift, then you're obviously at risk of it. And that's just because you're overloading the tissue and something they can't tolerate. But if you're fatigued, then you're more likely to get injured. Okay. So this is the thing, is like when I'm talking to clients, especially as they're getting back in, if people who haven't deadlifted, let's say in a year or 2 years, it's okay. We know what your max was before. The max might be 150 kg. And I just noticed, because I'm finished up with a power lifter recently, max was something like 150 to 170 kg. But because he had that in the back of his head, he thought he should get up there as quick as possible. But like, you will adapt to it quickly, but you still need to start low and you still need to build up over time. Okay. And then you need to manage the fatigue and manage that sensitivity and all that as well. So unless you're doing that, like he was saying, oh, it's definitely my form that caused it. But when we look back at the history of the time when it happened to him, there was a lot of stuff going on with that. He had exams. He was preparing for competition. He had 2 competitions very close to each other. He was very fatigued because he was working long hours in a job as well while he was studying. His sleep was poor, very, very poor. He was drinking no real water, and his diet had dropped. So that's like, did he have bad technique on one day, or had all those other things contributed to his injury? And all in all, it was all those other things that had contributed to it, and that was made the biggest difference. So before you go looking at exercise technique, you need to look at all the other stuff as well. Like, what's your sleep like? Is it good? Are you drinking enough water? Are you managing your stress properly, that you're not just like highly stressed all day and then trying to go to the gym and blow off steam all the time? Like, that's a great way of doing it, and it's the way that a lot of people use, I guess, is exercise to blow off steam. But you need other avenues as well to manage your stress, so that it's not just exercise, because exercise is load. It's adding extra load to an already fatigued body. Okay. So to, I guess, circle back to your original question, with when you're looking at how to reduce the load on the lower back and how to stop yourself from getting injured with these exercises, is you need to make sure that you're managing everything else. And then when you do that, then you slowly progress over time. Have someone have a look at your technique. Just make sure that you're not doing anything crazy. If you look at the best powerlifters in the world, they're going to arch their back in general when they're lifting heavy weight. The heavier the weight is, the more likely you are going to do that. Just make sure that when you do that, that you're well capable to set yourself up, okay, to like that you have built up a good tolerance to it. Because those lads aren't pulling 200 kg or pulling 250 kg off the bat. Like, they've been training for years to do that, and they've a bit good tolerance, and they've good, let's say, strength through their core. They've good strength through their shoulders, through their hips, that it's not just falling on the back itself, even though they are arching slightly. Okay. Does that make sense? It'll be probably a different thing than what you've heard people say if you need to focus on these specific cues.
Yeah. Really, really fascinating, especially kind of coming in from a background of just being a personal trainer and just kind of really nailing the technique side of things like a lot. Really, really cool to hear the other side of things as well. So with that, then would you say it's almost just kind of like, if you with the deadlift or with any exercise, if you start off and you first, like if you start at a pace where you are comfortable and you're not overexerting yourself, then even if the technique isn't kind of quote unquote perfect, or what we've seen as a textbook kind of deadlift, if we are slowly progressing at our own pace, the injury of risk is minimal, kind of thing.
That's exactly it. And you're progressing at a good pace. The thing is, you will overexert, and it's very good to overexert. You need to do that to obviously get the adaptations from training. But when you do that, you don't want to overexert on the Monday deadlifting and then do that again on the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. You need to give yourself rest days at times to make sure that you are actually recovering from it. And there's nothing wrong with going to, like, obviously you could do like a push pull legs split. You could do it whatever split you want. I was a personal trainer myself as well for a couple of years, and I knew that was a big thing as well. Was like I was really pushing technique, but what I found was when I was telling people to watch your back, mind your back, that those people were more likely to get injured. They were more likely to get these back spasms and back flare ups, and it's because they were so conscious about their back all the time, and not as conscious about, okay, well, let's just make sure everything else is right. Go through this lift. I don't need to worry about my back because it's strong. If you had that frame of mind, you'd be a lot less likely to get injured. Okay. That's a simple answer to it though. But does it answer your question?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's like it's a really cool point on that. Like, I think when I first got into training, like around 15, 16, I remember kind of being pulled up on my deadlift form once, and going over, and every time after that, just doing it, like looking over in the mirror, and that's probably made it way worse, kind of from an injury standpoint, doing it sideways, trying to look over in the mirror.
That's so true. It is true. And to be honest, it's happened to me. Like if I'm in the gym, let's say over here, like you'll always get people kind of eyeing you up or having a look at it, and it'll be like, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that, and make changes. And to be honest, I don't like. There's a lot of people that like they mean well. That's the thing. They don't mean bad. But if you're very concerned with that all the time, that conscious awareness will actually cause an increase in sensitivity. So that's why I was saying about the back is such a area that people protect. If you're always thinking about that, one little like spasm or a small bit of DOMS in the back becomes a bigger issue then, because you think, oh, gee, I've done the worst thing possible to it. So that's why you need to be careful with it.
Okay, yeah, incredible. So, so how would we like? Is there a way to differentiate when to take the rest and when we should kind of maybe slow down, and when it's just a spasm and something that we can kind of continue training for?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's different for everybody because like a lot of the time, one person's, let's say, well, if we're focusing on the back here specifically, a spasm for somebody, when it flares up and when it gets really bad, there's usually a lot of things going on in the background. So you'll find if you actually sit them down, chat to them, talk them through, okay, is everything all right with work? Like there could be financial problems. They could have new kid, or they could have kids, I'd say, or young kids that are keeping them awake at night. They're just not sleeping well. There could be someone sick in the family. That's most likely when a flare up happens, when a back and these spasms start kicking in. The next thing is, what I always say to people is, when it does flare up and when it does happen, watch the big inhale and breath hold, and where you grip it and you go and start holding your breath. If you do that, automatically it's going to get worse, because you're just contracting all the muscles for a muscle that's spasming. It's like if you got a hamstring cramp and you cut a hold of that and you squeeze it as tight as you can be sure that hamstring cramp is only going to get worse. So it is important to look at just breathing through it, relax yourself down, do basic movements, and then sit down, whatever, relax yourself for another couple of seconds, just go through your breathing, maybe pop up and do a few basic mobility exercises, a couple of flexibility ones, nothing too serious, and just chill out for a few minutes and see if it calms down. And a lot of the time it will calm down. Now, if it doesn't calm down, then you're probably overly fatigued. And you're probably overly stressed. So the best thing that you could do in those situations is maybe go for a walk in nature, like go home and just chill out, drink your water, make sure you get a good night's sleep. Just stay away from the phone for a small while at nighttime, because there's nothing worse than looking up on Google, what's wrong with me now? My back has spasmed. If you want a sure way of lining yourself up for a surgery, that's it. So just be careful with that, I would say. Now there is like, if there's an injury, then like a muscle tear, like if you, let's say if you have a severe back injury, and the thing is, you need to be careful here with giving advice out on podcasts, because it's without having the background of it and what's going on, you just need people to be careful. But if you start to get like pins and needles into your legs, stuff like that, then that's a bit more of a serious issue. So you need to be careful with that. If it happens to you, that's when I'd look to be maybe talking to a professional, just to be sure. But in general, if it's just muscle spasms in the back, just think about how you can get it moving, like bending down, touching your toes, extending back, rotating, stuff like that. That will help it a lot. And then go back, chill out. Don't take 3, 4, 5 rest days. Make sure that you are doing something, whether it be walking or going for like a light run, or even just getting on a bike. And that's one thing I found with people, is that the quicker you get back at it, the faster you recover. But if you really extend it for too long, then it's going to be a problem. So when to know? Yeah, it depends on your training schedule. It depends on your everything that's going on in the background as well. Just so and stop me if you want to at any stage. But just so I guess another thing that you need to look at is general signs of fatigue that people will get would be the likes of irritability, that they start to just get irritated by everything, people around them and everyone. Irritability, anxiousness, if you find that you're very anxious and you're not looking forward to things, lack of motivation to go to the gym. Other ones would be like nervousness is another big one. Sleepiness, that you're just dozing off all the time, you can't focus, you can't concentrate. Outside of that, you might have an injury that flares up. So let's say like a shoulder that's starting to kick up, or a hip or a back that's starting to kick up, and something that you hadn't noticed before. That's usually a sign that, okay, it's probably time to take 2 days off here, or a day off, or whatever it is, or a couple of days off, and that will help a lot. But yeah, I think they're the main signs that I would look out for. So a lot of stuff covered there.
No, yeah, it got me thinking. So yeah, I think fascinating. I suppose to just kind of know, okay, like we can kind of definitely, like, it's the fatigue side of things. It is so huge, and managing that first would be a big one. So to me, it's just like, maybe I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but like to me, it just sounds like if our back has spasmed on one of our workouts, to not overthink it, not getting our head, and if we are feeling better and it's not there the next day or the next workout time around, just go back in and just do even stuff at lower kind of intensity, or just kind of keep yourself moving as well, if it's not there, kind of thing as well.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. Ease into it again, ease back into what you're doing, and like you will get it. You'll get, like, I was training this morning in jiu-jitsu, and I was getting foot cramps like all day in it. But I know that was from it because I was doing boxing during the week and stuff like that. So I had tested it out, and it's just fatigue a lot of the time, and that's why it was kicking up. But people have to remember that physiologically, foot cramp, a hamstring cramp, and a back cramp are all the exact same thing. A back spasm, they just name it slightly differently. Physiologically, they're the same thing. It's all the psychological stuff that you connect to that makes it worse. You don't care about a foot cramp or a hamstring cramp because it's not that big of an issue. But a back cramp, you have all the nerves in your back that run to your legs. So it starts to become a bigger issue, and you create a bigger issue in your head then. So that's really what people need to watch out for, is how they react to it at the time. And exactly what you just said there, just get yourself moving, ease yourself into it. It might be that you just change exercises, that you stop doing the deadlift for a few minutes and you might go to like a pull-up, or you might do like a single arm row, or it could be that you just go into a press movement, lower body movement. Just ease yourself into it, really. But then if it is fatigue as well, you probably do have to take a rest day. Probably have to take 2 rest days. Or if you're training, another big one I see is that if you're training for like 10 weeks straight and you're training 4 or 5 times a week, then it's probably time to take a rest week. That you just have a low week and you take a week that you're either doing very little, or that you're just changing it completely and you're just relaxing. And I think a lot of people miss out on those rest weeks at times.
Yeah, for sure. I think I see so many people kind of just run themselves into the ground with their training and just kind of continuously kind of have it tip over like week after week. Yeah.
And it looks bad as well at times on, let's say, a PT. It's like they'll say, oh, I always get injured when I'm training. You'll hear that a lot. But it's like, well, what's your training schedule look like? it's not the PT's fault a lot of the time. Like, you need to make sure that you are taking rest days and that you're not just filling your weekends with, okay, I have high energy now, so I'm going to train 4 or 5 days a week. Then on the weekends, I'm just going to go for hikes and I'm going to go for runs and I'm going to fit other stuff in. That's what's going to contribute to it. So I usually advise people, and any PTs that are like that are working with me, I'd always tell them to try squeeze in like a small rest week or a low week every 6 to 8 weeks, just to give the client a chance to recover, get their feet under themselves again. And it'll also improve their motivation. They won't be going for 10 weeks, 12 weeks, get injured, and then stop for 4 weeks when I just hate the gym then because they got injured there. So you do need to plan that in. And a lot of the time clients will have a lot of respect for you when you do that. But you have to be able to explain it. If they just say, well, we're not doing anything this week, it's like, yeah, well, this is your adaptation week. Like, this is where you make all the gains that you just train for.
With rest weeks, what are your thoughts on it? Like, I see a lot of people like say like deloads are more optimal in that kind of approach, or is it kind of, would you say it's just going to take an entire week of training?
Yes, it completely depends on your training schedule. When I say rest weeks, a lot of the time, I'm talking from a performance aspect, in that a lot of people that I train with are sports, and they're playing at the top level as well. A good few of them. So like a rest week for them is actually a week where they do very little on their off days, and they train on the days that they have to. They might have club training, like, let's say the majority of them train in the club with like a Tuesday. They do a gym session on Thursday, they do a gym session Wednesday, then they do like a pitch session Fridays, like prep for a game, and then Saturday, Sunday they go to a game. They might have to travel for it as well. And they usually get Mondays off. So a rest week for them is like, okay, well, let's just ease off on the gym session that you're doing this week. Okay, on the Tuesday and Thursday, there's probably very little need for you just to get extra work in when you could just ease off. For someone who's training to get fit and for body comp, your rest week could probably be better to do a deload week, where you're easing off it a small bit more and you're just not doing as much. You might just take one extra workout off. So instead of doing whatever 5 workouts or 4 workouts in a week, you do 3 and then have one that's set for like a mobility flexibility day, and you can just chill. That type of stuff is good as well. But just making sure, because we're looking at the research. If you're building strength and if you're working at heavy weights all the time, it's like a 6-week mark. You kind of want to ease out.
Okay.
The first time. And the thing is, I should say, is if you do that the first time at the 6-week mark, you ease off. You can probably go for 8 weeks the next time, and then you can ease off.
I see.
Because remember, you will adapt and get stronger.
Yeah, sure. So, I suppose with the like you talked on the client, like a bit of a leeway into that. I suppose like you talked about the client stuff and like with the athlete stuff and the work you do with them. Like, just to touch on that a little bit. Like what's the kind of work I suppose you do with them, and how are you helping them?
Which population?
Just kind of your body recomp, like your kind of lifestyle kind of guys.
Okay. Yeah, I generally don't do body recomp. It wouldn't be stuff that I would focus on a bit. I'd focus on specifically people who've come back from injury. Now, it might be that I set them up because I work with 12 and 24-week basis and year-long basis. But it could be that I'm setting it up that they want to get back into the gym and be able to work out at high intensity and work out with a personal trainer for a while. Like, that could be a lot of the stuff. But the actual, let's say, and I'll admit it myself, the nutrition side of things is just not my strong point. I just don't have a massive interest in it. So I would be the wrong person to come for just purely body comp. That's why it's usually injuries that are getting back to it. The type of stuff that I would be doing with them, though, would be figuring out what their injuries are first, figuring out a lot what their beliefs are around injuries. That's a huge part as well. And then we'd also look at working in like a consistent mobility routine. We work on sleep a good bit and really work on improving sleep and getting consistent sleep. Work on hydration as well and making sure they're hydrating well for the performance or their sport that they're getting back into, or their gym sessions that they're getting back into. And then we work a lot on stress management and stress management tools, what they can do. Breathing as well is a huge one. I do take a fairly holistic approach to it, because I'm always trying to affect the nervous system specifically. And to do that, you need to take it from all aspects, because everything feeds into the nervous system.
Yeah. Okay. So it's almost like a combination. It's not just like we see on Instagram, I suppose, you might as well, like, the kind of, okay, if you're injured, do this kind of one stretch for 30 seconds, hold it for,
Oh,
and then
yeah, yeah.
then you're
No, I
healed
never.
kind of
No,
thing.
no. I've moved away from that. I might have like it's basically like the same as what like a PT might do, that they set it up with an online thing, like let's say True Coach or whatever it is. You have all your sessions laid out. For a lot of people, it'll start off with you're building a foundation of mobility that you're able to just like work through exercises to get your body moving again. Then it works into like strength work, gym work, and strength work. And then on the weeks, then we don't do or let's say on the weeks that I should rewind. Sorry, they have their program, and then every second week we do a call. So we do a video call and we discuss everything, because it's not like when they have these long-term injuries, it's not just okay, you have a mechanical injury, let's say like a muscle tear, as I was saying. There's a lot more going on with that, and there's a lot of like beliefs, a lot of attitudes that need to be worked on and changed, so they can actually reintegrate themselves back into the activity that they want to do. So that's the calls that we do really help with that. And then I do voice note check-ins as well, just to make sure everyone's all right. And then it's big educational based program, I would say.
Amazing. So yeah, it sounds like from an injury standpoint, if from the stuff so far, it sounds like if we can kind of nail the sleep, the stress, and get us feeling calm alongside the mobility and the workouts, then we'd be in a really good place, like recovery wise, I suppose, for the most part.
Yeah. It would be like from a rehab perspective. Yeah. Once you can't, I can do all the work in the world with giving them every exercise under the sun about how to, let's say, fix an area or take down sensitivity. But if they're not sleeping properly, they're not coding that. So their brain doesn't actually code it. So it doesn't actually change the sensitivity, because that's what you are looking to do. And sleep is your main time that you recode, you form new memories, you consolidate old memories that you can, like, let's say, recall is huge. And then the other thing is, if you have sleep deprivation, if you lack sleep, what can happen is your body will only code negative information. So that they've found out in research that you'll be more likely to code negative experiences as opposed to positive experiences, because of the fact that I think with survival mode, like, it's more important to know where a pack of lions are or where poisonous fruit is, as opposed to where a lovely apple tree is. You know, that there's a big difference there. So that's why when you're lacking sleep, your body has to prioritize what it's going to heal. And if you're not what it's going to heal, but what it's going to remember. And it's going to remember the negative as opposed to the positive because of that, for that reason. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think with sleep, there's so many kind of things, like if we neglect it, like everything else kind of goes out the window. Like, I think we feel like more hungry as well. Like we code a negative as well. It
Yeah,
leaves us screwed completely.
it's so true. It is. There's so much involved in sleep, and just getting your 7 to 8 hours or 7 to 9 hours is huge. And if you start getting them, then you'll notice the change. But you can live. People can always say like, "Oh, I can live off 5 hours." You can live off it, yeah. There's no, like, you can, but you don't know what you're missing out on until you start getting 7 to 9 hours. Then you'll actually say, "Oh well, Jesus, I have all this extra energy. I have such a better mood. I can train much longer. I'm recovering faster. I don't have as much DOMS. I don't have any pain." There's a lot more involved in it, as you said, than just getting a nice sleep. Like,
Yeah. So I suppose with anyone kind of going through injuries, like, I suppose a bit of a loosening, or just feeling a bit like sore, a bit or fatigued, at the minute, it's just kind of revisiting those things first, rather than like trying to overhaul everything, like all the like little things with the training and the stretching and mobility, just like review everything rather than just like trying to do
yeah,
more stretches and do kind of less, or change the gym program as well.
yeah, definitely. And you need to look at what you are doing. If there's a joint injury that you're suffering with, you'd be looking away from flexibility and stretches. You need to look at like mobility exercises where you're actually getting them moving. And for the people who don't know the difference, flexibility is the length of muscle can stretch, while mobility is more to do with movement, and range of motion in a joint. So that's why like you want to look away from just holding stretches, because that just works on the flexibility. You want to be able to move. So that's the reason that you're stretching the muscle, is so you can move better. So try get that moving. Instead of going down for a hamstring stretch, look at something like a leg swing. For like if you're having knee issues, look at like a single leg RDL body weight, where you can go down up and down into position. Things like that. They'll help a lot. If you have back tightness and back pain, try touching your toes. That's a great way of just helping that. And because it's a movement, I'm not stretching my back. I'm working down into position and coming back up out of it again.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, brilliant. So one thing on the injury side of things, I've heard over and over, in terms of in the gym, it's just kind of like, oh, I'm feeling a bit injured or feeling a bit sore. Like it's kind of the quote, and I'll just kind of deep heat it, or I'll just put a bit of ice on it, or that kind of thing. I'll just have an ice bath and that should kind of heal it. What are your thoughts on those things? Do they do much, or are they just something that we should kind of neglect completely for the time being?
Yeah. Yeah, I go against a lot of people's beliefs here now, and these, and I'm getting in so many arguments with people over this. But yeah, so if you get an injury, like you shouldn't ice it. And people think you should ice it, and it's like people at every level, people all the way up to consultants, at the highest level will do it. And I had a friend here who sprained an ankle last week in a competition, and everyone was telling me you have to do this, 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 and this. And I just came out and I was like, don't ice it. Don't put ice anywhere near it. The reason being is that when you ice an area, this is after an acute injury. This is after, let's say, you sprain an ankle and that. If you ice it, it causes all the capillaries and all the veins and arteries to close up, to constrict. Okay. And that's because it's such a change in temperature. They don't want to lose a lot of heat. Now, people think, oh, great, that's going to stop swelling. But what it stops is, or what it delays, I should say, is when you have an injury, you have these markers that come through there. Obviously your cardiovascular system. They go to the area, they mark the areas that are injured, and they mark them for healing. Okay. But if you put ice on it, it closes up your cardiovascular system, closes up all the veins, all the arteries, and those markers can't come through. So swelling isn't that much of a problem. It's not that it's not that big of an issue. You can get swelling just with pain. Okay. So you can get swelling to an area just if you think it's sore, not even if there's no injury there. You can just still get swelling. So that's why it's important to look at kind of easing it back in. First, obviously, talk to a professional. If you get an injury, don't just be taking advice through a podcast. You need to talk to a professional first. But I would avoid icing completely for any acute injury, like ankle injury or something like that, because it just vasoconstricts, tightens everything up. The opposite end is a deep heat, and like Tiger Balm and those, they're topical analgesics, is what they're called. So they will reduce the amount of pain that you feel, and ice will as well. That's the thing, it'll reduce the amount of pain you feel. But is it directly affecting the muscle itself? Most likely not as much. But what you could do, like if it's a muscle injury, what I say to people is get into like a sauna where you're actually heating from the inside out, the outside in, whatever way you want to look at it, where it's actually raising your body temperature, and it's releasing these heat shock proteins, and these are involved in muscle repair and healing. So they can be helpful. A heat pack can be helpful for people because it takes down a spasm at times. But you need to look at getting it moving, because the body's going to heal through movement. It's not going to heal just by leaving it up and leaving it sitting there. So much so that they have found, what they're doing now is they used to, if you, let's say, broke a hand, if you had a simple fracture in your hand, they used to put you in a cast for 6 weeks. But now what they're doing is like 3 to 4 week mark, taking you out of the cast and getting you moving, because that's obviously going to promote healing a lot more than just having it laid up. So you need to look at that and look at naturally, or over the last couple of, let's say before we had doctors and physios and that, thousands of years ago, like what did the body do? And it had natural healing responses. So you need to be as in line with those as possible when you're looking at it. So ice, it'll make you feel good, definitely, but it's not going to be the cure-all. And deep heat, if you want to rub it on, and if you find that it helps and it helps to warm up the area and helps you to be less conscious of the area, then I've no problem at all. Use that. That's grand. But if you want to affect the muscle itself and affect the area, you have to look at something that's going to hit it a small bit deeper. Does that make sense? Hopefully.
Yeah, for sure. So I suppose with the kind of like it can maybe help with the deep heat side of things. Can just maybe help with, or in the sauna can just help from just easing the kind of immediate pain. But kind of actually recovering long term and fully from it, it's just going to keep yourself moving, keeping yourself mobile, and doing all those other things kind of mentioned prior.
Yeah, if the deep heat gets you moving more, then perfect. Great. Then it's like, okay, it was an adjunct, it was a helpful thing. But if it didn't get you moving more, then there's no point of doing it. So you still have to do the movement side of things.
Yeah. Okay. And transitioning from that, like with, I know that one can be a bit of a blowy one, I suppose, but with exercises for ourselves, like with, I know we kind of touched on the deadlift side of things, and like, okay, we shouldn't not do them, but if we are they kind of mental signs or kind of guidelines that we can kind of work towards ourselves when to do particular exercises and when to miss them out, for example?
Yeah, see, that's a difficult one to answer because of like the degree of an injury. So you could have like a grade 1 hamstring tear, and you might be able to get away with weighted single leg RDLs, and because it might be a certain part of the hamstring that it doesn't hit. Okay, but if you do a lying hamstring curl, it might hit it there, and that might hit it a bit more. So I would be hesitant to give out certain exercises for certain injuries just because of that, because I could say, well, the best thing for your back is deadlifting, but somebody who has let's say a protruding disc that's touching off a nerve, that might cause that to aggravate it a small bit more. Okay, so you need to obviously do other movements instead. So that's why, and I should clarify that and say that I was very specific in saying a protruding disc that's touching off a nerve as opposed to just a bulging disc, because everyone has bulging discs. They're not a problem, but it's only when they actually touch off a nerve that it can be a bit more of an issue. So just to come back, because a lot of people you have to clear these things up when you're working online, and you can't talk to the person directly, because a lot of people can connect to things like that and attach to it. Yeah, so I would be hesitant to say that there's certain exercises you do and certain exercises you can't do. You're really looking at the volume, and you're looking at the intensity, how severe it is, and what they're feeling when they are doing it. That's probably the best way of looking at it.
Okay. Yeah. So so maybe kind of like first, just like, again, just the same kind of thing we touched on, just kind of first looking at the kind of lifestyle factors, seeing how those are, and then maybe looking at the kind of volume as a whole, and just seeing like how much, like what kind of exercise the orders are, how much sets, how much kind of, what does kind of volume, the sets, the reps, and that kind of stuff are as well.
Yeah, and what weight you're lifting. As I was saying, to go back to that example, it's so difficult because, like, as I was saying, a single leg RDL might not hit the spot, but the lying hamstring curl could hit the spot. And it might be that person is saying, okay, right, I'm able to do a single leg RDL, and then they start doing them and they keep upping their weight, but then at the 40 kilo mark, it does hit the spot. Okay, and then you're at risk of injury. So that's why it's difficult to say that, because the more weight you add, obviously the higher risk it is when you're looking at injuries. And it's best for those situations just to follow your professional's advice, I would say.
Okay, yeah, brilliant. So maybe just kind of first touching on the lifestyle things, and just kind of like questioning yourself, and then alongside that, just making sure you're like, if you have like that kind of gut instinct something's wrong, then going over and seeing a professional, and just kind of getting it checked out that way around.
Definitely, yeah, that's it. That's the best side in it. Because like I have said things in the past and to people at the gym and stuff like that when I was a PT, and people pick up things differently. Even though I could lay it out one way, people will pick it up different, and they'll try other things, and they'll say, "Well, Robbie said this," so that's it. And then there'll be an argument, and then someone will be writing to me then. But that's why you just need to be careful with the way you phrase things from this side of profession, or from this side of things, especially when it comes to injuries, because you don't want anyone to injure themselves more. You want them to be getting better and back training.
Yeah, especially, I suppose, especially as they can't kind of ask a question back on here, like they'll just kind of listen, like everyone, you can just kind of listen over to a podcast and just kind of take it one way, and that's kind of it with a podcast. So
yeah, like someone could have just been making a coffee there when I talked about the single leg RDL, and they could have picked up on, well, hamstring curls hit the spot, and okay, grand, I have a torn hamstring, let's just do hamstring curls. So that's why it is. It's dangerous in that way. But it's a good question though. Like I see what you're getting at, but I couldn't answer it clearly.
Okay, and with the client stuff and I know you kind of mentioned the kind of the weekly check-ins, the catch-ups, and kind of having that kind of having kind of reviewing and visiting everything, the sleep, the fatigue, the stress. Do you have a bit of a process that you follow, like a bit of a process or a guideline with all your kind of injuries, or does it kind of vary completely from person to person?
Yeah, it varies. It does vary from person to person. I try to keep as in line as possible with the body's natural healing response and what we would have done if we didn't have a physio, and we didn't have a doctor, because I think that's its natural way to heal. It's a natural way to get back to doing what you want to do. So my process would follow that as closely as possible. I rarely, if ever, and mostly never, I don't think I've ever done it, told anyone to take ibuprofen or anti-inflammatories, anything like that, because it's just not a natural thing to take. And I would look at just pushing and pulling, I guess, is like I played on the side of that most physios probably play on the side of caution, while I'd be a lot more aggressive with my rehab, in terms of getting people back, because even like a lot of the guys that will come to me might have a match in 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and they have a knee injury and they need to get back for that game. So it's like, okay, right, if we need to get back, we need to just make sure that we're getting everything right here, ticking off all the boxes to give you the best chance, as opposed to saying, I'm going to give you these exercises, go away for 2 weeks, see what you're like, and come back in 2 weeks again. So it would be erring on the side of aggressiveness, my rehab plan, but it'd be aggressive to the natural healing things. And as I was saying, the education side of things helps that, in that they understand then when they can push and when they can pull back, and what they can do, and how far they can go. Because if they don't understand that, it's going to be difficult to just give them exercises and say keep going.
Yeah, and I suppose with that, like having you kind of like closely intact, having you like together on their journey just makes it so much easier to push, or to get there a little bit quicker and push a little bit harder as well, I suppose. When you
yeah, and they have my WhatsApp as well, so they can just give me a text if they ever need it, if they ever have any trouble, and they're like, okay, grand, I need a bit of help on this, or what am I supposed to do for this. So that obviously helps them as well. At the start, like, you'll get a lot of WhatsApp messages, but my goal is like by week 4, where you have a good enough understanding that, because I have this, like, what I talk to them is like, I have a rehab and I have a performance side of things. As soon as we can get out of the rehab, perfect, then we can go into the performance. And I get them, like the majority of people that worked with me will be back training, in full training. I try to get them back within 5 weeks. That's kind of the goal. That's my goal. And then so that way we can move from that rehab to performance. This is obviously clientele that have been out of training for years. So that's the kind of idea behind it, and the aggressive approach helps that.
Okay, so with the rehab stage, what are the kind of stuff, like, maybe not from like do this one exercise kind of thing, not at all, but like, what are the kind of like, are they kind of stuff that you prioritize during that period? Is it kind of the lifestyle stuff alongside the mobility sessions, or?
Yeah, during the rehab period, it's exercise based, on top of the lifestyle stuff. Yeah, so it is like, a lot of the time it's just getting the lifestyle stuff perfect before we start really pushing on, because as I was kind of talking about before, we have like volume weeks, so we have high weeks, low weeks, medium weeks, and I'm obviously building, and then giving a rest week, and building again and giving a rest week. So it really depends on where they're at. It might be that they need to start off with a low and a medium because they have been out of training so long. But in general, the rehab phase, like, might be more to do with very specific exercises, while the performance phase is more to do with like general strength preparation, general physical preparation stuff. And it obviously ties into it then. If it's somebody who's getting lower limb injuries, they'll have to get some, and they want to get back to like football, they're going to have to do some type of running and some type of skill stuff. So that's obviously going to be included as well. So that will be a big part of it as well, is like the running phases of what a rehab would look like, and then the running phases of what a performance would look like. They're just different. Same with a gym session as well.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so I suppose the one, we're obviously expecting the first one to be kind of lower, I suppose, lower intensity in a way, maybe. And then the second one, it's just kind of improvements from a performance standpoint. Like,
yeah,
kind of gradual improvements kind of thing. Okay.
Yeah, that would be it. Yeah. That's probably the best way to describe it.
Okay. Perfect. So I don't want to kind of keep you too long, Robbie. So just a final kind of a few things to touch on, I suppose. Finally, so one of my little questions I really like kind of to finish things up on is wrapping up from your entire journey from kind of being a personal trainer to going through more specific stuff with the rehab and your own training. What do you feel like is your kind of one biggest lesson for that kind of entire journey?
It's a good question. What's my biggest lesson from the journey of doing different things?
Or it can be like anything you want. Like, to be fair, it can be personal, it can be mindset, or just injury wise, like wherever comes to mind.
That's a good question. I would say, I guess one of my main lessons was that the body is extremely strong and extremely adaptable. And it can adapt to nearly anything that you put it under. And once you give it enough time to recover. And I've seen that from my own training, and I've seen that when I'm working with clients who are doing like big things, like let's say running 100K or doing long, a couple of weeks cycles and stuff like that. And it's just, it's very strong, it's very adaptable, but you need to have everything right so you can give it that opportunity. And then you need to obviously pull back at times, but then there's other times you can push on. So I think that's the biggest thing that I learned. It's strong, it's adaptable. I always say it's like a healing and adaptation machine, which is a great thing. So once you can have a goal in mind, there's very little that'll stop you getting there. Physical or mental is probably one thing that a lot of people struggle with. Mental will break down before the physical. But you can work on the mental the same as you can work on the physical. You stress it, you give a chance to adapt. You can work on the emotional the same as you work on that. You stress it, you give it a chance to adapt. So it's just that will be my big thing, is that it's extremely strong and extremely adaptable.
Yeah, it's amazing. Okay, so with this episode and with everything covered so far, the listeners are looking to kind of find out a little bit more, find out a little bit more about the specific like bits and content, and just maybe want to kind of reach out and work specifically with managing and overcoming injuries with your help. Where can they find you? Where would be the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, Instagram is really the best one. Mobility Tutor on Instagram is the best place. I have exercises there if anyone hasn't an understanding of what mobility is. I talk about different injuries, and then I also have my own podcast where I go into a lot more detail on these topics. So if that's what I'm saying, we could be here talking for 3 or 4 hours if I was to go down the different rabbit holes. But that's why the podcast, I guess, is good. It gives me a small bit of time that I can sit down and talk for maybe 20 minutes or half an hour on a specific topic. And I talk about all the topics that I spoke about on this podcast as well. And that's Mobility Experiment podcast, and it's on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, whatever you want to look it up on. So jump over there, subscribe to that, and jump on Instagram. And if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate, just send them straight on to me.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think Robbie is someone that gets back really, really like quickly on Instagram, as I know. So yeah, like you get your kind of questions answered. Links wise, I will attach all the podcast stuff and the Instagram links down on Spotify. I think there is a way to do it, so that's cool.
That's perfect. Excellent.
Perfect. So yeah, we'll kind of wrap up there, and I suppose maybe that's a bit of a backwards way to do it, but anything else you want to add on all the stuff we've covered so far, Robbie?
No, for everything that we've covered, I think we kind of went into a good bit of detail. I like the way the podcast went. In fairness, man, you're a very good, well able to direct it. And I like the way the questions went. I know there's parts now when people listen to it that they'll be like, Jesus, they could have got into a bit more detail here and there. So It's hard for me. We went over so many topics to think of that. So really, if there's any other questions, send them to myself or yourself, and we'll get back to them, I guess, is the main thing.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. And like you say as well, like I have no doubts they'll be covered in a ton more detail if anyone wants to cut. Like, if anyone wants any of the particular topics on your podcast, so they can kind of be like, okay, this is kind of what I need. I will just find it on your podcast, and they can kind of hear it like inside and
Yeah,
out, I suppose.
definitely. Yeah.
Perfect. I will